And good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Lynch. I'm the city manager here in Newton Falls, Ohio. This is our morning briefing regarding the COVID-19 era. It's something we do on a daily basis, Monday through Saturday. We take a day off on Sundays. It's only a 15-minute program, but it's really an addendum to what happens with reference to the governor's pressers on a couple days a week, and also what is happening on a national basis from the president and his task force members, such as Dr. Fauci. So we want you to pay attention to them and what they're saying. But we also want to give you a little bit of a flavor of what's going on in Newton Falls. When this entire process happened of being sheltered in, a number of community members contacted me and said, well, what are you doing in the city? How are you letting us know how things are going on in terms of Newton Falls in particular? And so we started these morning briefings. They're just a few minutes. They start around 7:30 in the morning, give or take a minute or two, but they do have a local flair to them. What I wanted to do is this morning, before we get on to our guest, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that the senior class 2020 from Newton Falls High School is certainly a class with a lot of class. And what I mean by that is a really outstanding thank you note. I'm holding it up here. It came from the class president, Allison Sembach, over to Gregory Films. And the folks at Gregory Films, Tom Gregory in particular, the head of that organization, wanted me to express his appreciation, not just because you said thank you back, and that is an act of class for this class, but also for him to say how much he appreciated the opportunity to participate in the process of what was going on with the senior class 2020 in Newton Falls. I think he's been touched by the fact that these are great kids, great teachers, a great community, and this class in particular has shown their colors. Their colors being the colors of kindness, compassion, and community participation. And Tom Gregory, through his company and the videography work he does, got to be a part of this. And I know that was very meaningful to Tom, and he says to all of you, thank you. Thanks for being a great bunch of kids, a great bunch of potential leaders in our community, in our country, as you matriculate and move forward into the rest of your careers in college and other careers. So congratulations to the class of 2020. You are a class of kids with a bunch of class. Well, this morning we have really a guest that I've been looking forward to for a long time because he is sort of in the eye of the storm in terms of the COVID-19 activities to a great extent, and he's been in particular involved with enforcement to a great degree and analysis and participation in what's happening in Trumbull County with reference to the things that we have to do to be safe in the coronavirus era. And that is a person by the name of Chris Wilster, and I think his official title is Director of Environmental Health, which is one way of saying that he's helping us all be safe. From the Trumbull County Department of Health, Chris Wilster is on the line. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
I'm sure you've got a lot of war wounds in terms of all the experiences you've been through since this thing started. What would you say has happened so far, and how would you grade the citizens of Trumbull County right now in terms of their ability to deal with the coronavirus since this thing started and changed your life?
Well, this is good. We're in almost our ninth week of this, and in my opinion, I would say that the citizens of Trumbull County are doing, a really good job. I mean, it's, if you think we got roughly 200,000 citizens in the county, and I think we've gotten 700 through to 900 complaints in 8 weeks. So if you look at the sheer numbers, I think most of the people are doing what they're supposed to. They're trying their best. I mean, it's a difficult time for everybody. Everybody's trying to do what they can. You got a few bad eggs, but for the most part, everybody's been doing what they can.
Chris, walk me through the process of handling a complaint that comes in from the initial phone call or complaint to your conclusion of the matter. What's your protocol? How do you handle it?
Sure. So what we did at the beginning when we realized within a day or two that we were going to just get slammed with calls, we set up a hotline. And it's basically a voicemail because we just I don't have the staff to talk to every person that calls. So what we ask people is to leave a detailed message of their complaints. And then what I do is I pull them whenever I get a chance in between meetings, and I assign them out to sanitarians. I have 9 sanitarians, a plumbing inspector, and 5 clerical. So I technically have 10 people that can do inspections in the field. So I get it out to them. They'll visit the site. They'll see if any violations are occurring. And the governor was clear right away. He didn't want this to be heavy-handed. So what we try to do is try to educate the people, that are possibly in violation, and just say, hey, listen, this is why we're doing it. This is the intent. So let's, you work with us. And we try to coax them back into doing the right thing before we have to get heavy-handed with them.
Okay, so you get a call, you identify a sanitarian, which is one of your staff people. They go to the scene of the complaint, and then what happens?
Well, when they go out to the site, they see if there's any violation of the order. There's a lot of confusion about the orders themselves. There's been a few of them, and I don't blame the general public for not knowing all the inner workings of governor's orders, but there's a difference, and you know this better than anybody. There's a difference between somebody says something and what's written down.
Yeah.
So when we so the first 6 or 7 weeks, we got a lot of complaints about gloves. Well, and masks for that matter. It was never a requirement to wear gloves and masks. So a lot of the complaints I get, we had to go out, we had to do little, quote unquote triage to find out exactly if the complaint was valid. If it was, then we talked to the people. If it wasn't, and that's one of the really hard things for us, Dave, is we have to basically catch people. So if I get a call saying so-and-so's not wearing their mask, and I go out there and they're all wearing their masks, well, that's the end of the complaint. I can't violate for people for what somebody called and told us. I have to actually catch them in the act.
Sure. And then once you've had a dialogue, whether they're obviously in violation or not, would you say 99 to 100% of the time it ends with sort of a satisfied customer saying, thanks for reminding us, we'll try to remain in compliance? Has that been your experience?
Yeah, I think that's fair. 100% no, but there are people that just don't want to be told what to do no matter what, and we try to work with those people as best we can. But the vast majority will either say, okay, we'll get on board, or sorry we didn't. And to be honest with you, Dave, a lot of people don't understand what they're supposed to do because so much information has come out so rapidly. So we take some time to educate them as well.
Sure, Chris. On a statistical basis, have you actually had to issue paperwork, which is a paper citation, or has that been kept at a minimum?
Yeah, that's a very minimum. What our powers are, powers probably isn't the right word. What I'm allowed to do by law, I can't arrest anybody, I can't cite anybody, I can't give them a court summons. So what we do is we'll give them a warning. If we get a return call, then we give them a notice of violation. If we get another return call, we can set them up to come in and talk to the administrator, either myself or the health commissioner, and ultimately we would file court charges on them, depending after the Board of Health and so forth. So there's a longer process for me to get things done. At the beginning, we had a lot of sheriffs with us, the sheriff's deputies or the local police, and they are allowed to write summons. So there has been instances, I believe, where we got called out to after hours at bars, and I try to send my people out to bars in the middle of the night, but if we call the police, they'll go out, and the police have the ability to cite people, but I can only send a notice of violation.
Sure. And my presumption is those instances where someone's issued a written citation that is some other authority as a result of the interface with you, that's been few and far between.
With that, I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
It's been pretty rare that someone's been cited by any authority.
Yeah, correct. I bet you I can count on 2 hands in 8 weeks of this and over 700 to 900 complaints that people have been cited. Mostly the citations that I'm aware of that I personally wasn't there for is people in bars after hours when you weren't allowed to be.
Sure. Chris, you mentioned something which has really been at the forefront of a lot of discussion we've had on a local basis in Newton Falls, and that is that the confusion. And what I mean by that is you know, the governor's ratings for those press conferences during the week, everybody with rapt attention has been watching what the governor says. And then the Ohio Department of Health website finally comes out eventually with a written version of what had been said at the press conference. And sometimes they're not exactly the same, are they?
That's correct. That's correct. Anytime you're talking to somebody live like we're doing now, in my opinion, just humans, you talk and you say things, and then maybe afterwards you think a little better and say, oh, maybe I worded that incorrectly. People have been so, everybody's been such put through the ringer with this thing that, for instance, when I think the lieutenant governor last week announced that weddings, banquets will be open June 1st. Well, the press conference is about 2 to 3:30. Well, when I went back to my desk, I had calls like the timestamp was 2:30, and people were already calling me asking me for the rules.
Yeah.
So people don't understand that when something is said on live TV, it doesn't automatically make it. Everything is lined up, everything is so, and get answers. So it's just people they want to get after it. They want to get back to their normal lives, and I understand that. They need to hopefully be a little bit more patient, especially with my office. We're trying to do the best we can, but we take all our cues from the governor, and sometimes when he says things at the press conference, it's the first time I've ever heard of it.
Yeah. Well, not only that, Chris, I've been observing that when the governor talks about a new protocol, the written version of it, which is what all of us have to, in the end, adhere to, sometimes the written version of it doesn't come out the next day or even a couple days after that. And I imagine that also adds to some of the difficulty.
Correct. So yesterday, as you're probably aware, we had the largest group of openings with pools and baseball, softball, non-contact sports conditioning, bowling alleys. Of course, I'm going to forget something. I know I'm going to forget something.
Well,
but the point of it is Friday. Is sometime Friday is when the governors or the Ohio Department of Health release the actual orders. So they release on Friday before a holiday weekend, and then things open on Monday. That's a lot to take in that's a lot to take in for me, and it's what I do. Not to mention the normal citizen that is like, holy cow, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to open this, that, and the other? So would it be, in a perfect world, would it be nice to get a couple of weeks of having it? Yeah, sure. But, sometimes that just doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, I will tell you, Chris, on a local level, one challenge we've had as well is we've got copies of the orders from Dr. Acton, and we try to really look at them to the letter and also throw in looking at them in terms of the spirit of the order, if you can identify it. And frequently, the public, by watching the press conference, has a completely different concept. I'll give you a good example. We were trying to organize a town hall meeting where we'd have more than 10 people, and we were going to do it outside. And based on what we were hearing, we thought it was okay. But when we examined the orders in particular, we realized that it wasn't okay. And we just had to make sure we carefully read what was on paper from the Department of Health. And I'm sure you've told people to do that 1,000 times in the last 9 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't hold that against anybody. I understand what my job is, and we're here to educate, and I try to explain it the best I can. But it would be nice if I could, like for masks, for example, just to give you a quick example, is, there's 6 exemptions to wearing a mask. So they made a requirement for all employees to wear masks at a business. But, say, for instance, you work in a factory and you have to wear safety glasses, and if you have a mask on and fogs up your safety glasses, you can't be running a 10,000-pound press when you can't see anything. So there are exceptions to not wearing a mask. Some people have health conditions. Sometimes it's not practical. Me personally, I don't wear a mask when I'm sitting in my office by myself, but when I leave my office, I put the mask on. So a lot of times people in the public, they see somebody without a mask and they're quick to call and leave a message on the hotline about, hey, so-and-so didn't have their mask on, only for me to send somebody out there realizes that person has, asthma or some kind of medical condition, and they are not required to wear a mask. So, a lot of that, that takes up time, and it's unfortunate that there is that disconnect, but I understand it, and we work through it.
Yeah. Chris, It's been 9 weeks. You talked about between 700 and 900 complaints. We all draw a little bit of humor out of some aspect of our life. In fact, without a little bit of laughter, it's impossible to enjoy the rest of life. Laughter is like music. It's just something unique about human beings that lets us get through life a little bit. Tell us some of the ridiculous things that people have told you with reference to your checking out, things have been going on, some of the crazy excuses that you received.
Well, I don't know. The excuses I don't know because I don't personally do the
Sure.
inspections, but I'm the one that pulls the calls off the voicemail, and we
Yes.
get a lot of complaints that are just, we've gotten complaints about, so and so factory, and we got bugs, we got rats. Well, I mean that's not a coronavirus complaint. So I think
Right.
some people just took it, to unload. If one day we could sit down and I could play some of the messages, if I have to see if I still got them saved, and you might get a chuckle out of
Sure.
some of them. But on one hand, I don't want to laugh because these people in their minds, they're really, they're grieved, and they think they're grieved. So it's like it's a fine line between, okay, now what is this person, what their actual problem is, and they're not really saying it right. And I'm trying to understand, okay, maybe they mean this, and we'll go out and check it out for this. But I think some people just call to, they want to talk to somebody, even though they don't get to talk to a live human. Sometimes they just leave their troubles on the machine, and I listen to them, and I do what I can with every complaint.
Sure. So you get a lot of life stories that have nothing to do with coronavirus.
Yes, I've heard some doozies for sure.
Sure. You talked about some people pushing back a little bit, and it's sort of part of the American persona. Our country was founded based on people that pushed back against King George. But I sense in your tone that you've exercised quite a bit of understanding in realizing that it's part of the American persona for people to want to not necessarily always bow down and kowtow to authority. And it sounds like you've been sensitive to that streak.
Yeah, I've been the director. This is my 5th year. I was a field sanitarian prior to that, so I'm used to enforcing the laws as a field inspector and as the the director. But you have to, if you don't take into account somebody's personal situation. I don't think people wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to break the law today. Now Now this is what I do. I'm not talking about real serious laws, murders
Sure.
and so forth. Nobody, I don't think, wakes up and says, how can I really cause a public health nuisance today? Or how can I really do this, that, and the other? So, being what you said about the pushback and the, American spirit of independence and, questioning, I totally get that. I give everybody their fair shake. Hopefully most people that know me and have talked to me at least will say I'm fair and I'm consistent. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to have to follow the rules, and if you don't like the rules, you need to go to Columbus and talk to the people there, because we enforce the rules there. That's another misconception. We don't have too many of our own rules, but we have to enforce them. It's my job to enforce them, but I try to get there with a little back and forth. I don't like to be heavy-handed. I don't think that works well.
Yeah. Well, there was a phrase that was developed several years ago, and the phrase was, "Don't shoot the messenger." And to some extent, that's you're just the messenger, aren't you?
Yeah, correct. And like I said, again, back to Columbia, they make the rules in Columbus, and they make the laws in Columbus. So a lot of the times when we follow laws and rules. And I've heard what's 1,000 times, well, I don't think that rule's fair. And while I might not agree. Hey, or maybe I do agree. Yeah, that's right. I don't think it's fair. However, this is what I got to do. This is what I'm tasked with doing. And then, let's try to come to a conclusion.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, before we conclude, Chris, I would imagine that the Department of Health has had to interface with the county's lawyers through the Civil Division of the county's prosecutor's office as well, in order to make sure that you're treading lightly in terms of people's constitutional rights. Have you had to do that, or has the director had to do that?
I don't know what they're doing at the state level. They got their own lawyers, but I have contacted our prosecutor's office on a few instances to at least to get a bearing on if how I was reading something was the right way to read it, or if I was, how would I go about it? So yeah, I had to answer your question. Yes, I have talked to the one of the assistant prosecutors a few times about certain things. Yes.
Yeah. Chris, well, before we adjourn, just tell me on a personal level, you've been with the Department of Health several years. You just mentioned that. You've been in this field for a long time. Is this like anything else you've ever encountered? And, how's it changed your life, Chris?
Well, for me, we went through H1N1, and I was a field inspector. So when you're a field inspector, you're a soldier, so to speak, and not the general. So
Yeah.
when you're a field inspector, the boss tells you, so you work this, do this, we can help parking, whatever. We assist the nursing, because the medical nursing division. So we help when we can. But being, the director, it gives me a new perspective for like the planning. The planning is we had a emergency op open a week now.
Chris, you're fading on me.
Firefighters and the whole thing. So it has changed. Me personally, I got more gray hairs, and I probably lost some more hair.
Yeah.
But I do what I do. I don't do what I do for personal satisfaction. I do it to try to make this county in general a better place for my kids and everybody else's kids. And so for me personally, I've gotten some more gray hairs, and I've gone through a lot of stress over the 9 weeks. But this too will pass, and everybody will get on with their life, and hopefully I can sleep better at night knowing that I made a difference.
Yeah. Well, Chris, thanks very much. It's very meaningful to have you come on. We appreciate the work that you're doing and the stress and difficulty and potential conflict that it brings. But I will tell you that in Newton Falls, your department has been extremely responsive. You've always taken my calls and responded, gotten back to me, and so has the Director of Health, Frank Migliosi. So on behalf of all the citizens of the community of Newton Falls, keep up the good, difficult work. We appreciate you, and hopefully we can all relax a little bit more in the next few weeks.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. Thanks, Dave.
All right, thank you so much. Good health to you and your family, Chris. Bye now.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
All right, that was Chris Wilster from the Trumbull County Department of Health. One of the things he talked about was the difficulty of interpreting these laws or orders that are coming down from the state, helping other people interpret them, and then having to enforce them. And again, Chris has been put in the unenviable position of being the messenger for these things coming down from the state. Dr. Acton doesn't come into Newton Falls and enforce these directives. She just writes them down and posts them, and then people like Chris Wilster have to deal with them. But he's been patient, and he's tried to be kind through the process. One thing I will tell you is that the Department of Health has sort of allowed the rest of us in government to take our cue from their softer, more gentle approach to the idea of participating more in education as a way of enforcement, as opposed to issuing citations and prosecutions and that sort of thing. In Newton Falls, not one citation has been issued. There have been no arrests, and compliance has been very high. We haven't asked for people's medical records or anything of that nature. And I think the citizens of Newton Falls, as most of the community in Trumbull County generally, have done a great job of helping us flatten the curve, as the governor and Dr. Acton have said. Well, that brings us to the end of what was a very informative session. Stay in prayer. Wear your mask as a barrier between your nose and mouth and somebody else's nose and mouth. And as I say at the end of every single one of these broadcasts, God bless America, and God bless the city of Newton Falls.